The rooster crowed in the distance, announcing another dawn in the sleepy village of Ozala. The red earth was damp with dew, and the scent of firewood smoke drifted through the air as women prepared their morning meals. Children ran barefoot through the dusty paths, chasing each other's laughter, but not all children began the day with joy. In the far corner of Obi's uncle's compound, a small boy sat quietly on a wooden bench, his face buried in his hands. His name was Obi, a 10-year-old child whose eyes carried both innocence and a silent sadness. Obi's life had taken a cruel turn 5 years earlier when his parents died in a ghastly motor accident on the Enugu-Onitsha Expressway. His father, Namdi, had been a trader, his mother, Ifeoma, a school teacher. They were loved in the village. Their sudden death was a wound that never healed. As tradition demanded, Obi was taken in by his father's brother, Okafor, and his wife, Obiageli. At first, the arrangement seemed normal, family looking after family. But as time went on, Obi's presence in their home became less of a duty of love and more of a burden. Okafor, a quiet man, hardly spoke against his wife's sharp tongue. And Obiageli, hardened by life's struggles, quickly grew resentful of Obi. "Since this boy came here," she would mutter to her neighbors, "nothing has gone well. My business is failing. My children fall sick often. He is a bad omen." The whispers began to spread. In villages like Ozala, where superstition still held power, it did not take long for suspicion to turn into accusation. One evening after the family meal, Obiageli stood in the middle of the compound, her hands on her waist, her voice raised for all to hear. "People of Ozala, come and see. This boy that Namdi left behind is not an ordinary child. He is the reason for all our misfortunes. He is a witch." The word struck Obi like a spear. His small body trembled as villagers gathered, murmuring. He tried to speak, but no words came. His cousins, once his playmates, now looked at him with fear. An elder in the crowd spoke, stroking his beard. "Such things are not to be joked with. If the boy is truly a witch, he must leave. We cannot harbor evil among us." From that night, Obi's suffering deepened. Meals were denied him. He was beaten for the smallest mistakes. He was sent to bed hungry, his cries ignored. Okafor, though not fully convinced, remained silent. He was a man trapped between the voice of reason and the wrath of his wife. Days turned to weeks. Obi's body grew thinner, his cheeks hollow. Hunger gnawed at his belly like a wild dog. Sometimes he would sneak out at night to search for fallen mangoes or scraps from neighbors' waste bins, but even then he was often caught and chased away. "Witch," they spat, "go back to the forest where you belong." By the time Obi turned 10, his spirit was almost broken. He felt invisible, unwanted, cursed. His auntie, determined to rid herself of him completely, plotted one last cruelty: to starve him until he had no strength left. For 5 long days, he was locked out, given no food, no water, no shelter. Each day, his legs grew weaker, his vision dimmer. On the 6th day, unable to stand, Obi staggered out of the compound and into the village streets. He was barefoot, his clothes torn, his lips cracked like dry earth. He begged for food, but no one dared to help. Mothers pulled their children away. Shopkeepers shouted at him to leave their stalls. He wandered aimlessly, hunger clawing at his insides. By evening, Obi collapsed under the shade of a tree near the dusty roadside. He lay there, weak and trembling, his eyes staring blankly at the sky. He had not eaten for 5 days, and now he felt the cold grip of death drawing near. Meanwhile, miles away, a young Irish woman named Sophia Connolly was on her way back from a cultural festival in the neighboring town. She had come to Nigeria on vacation, fascinated by its rich traditions, colorful dances, and warm people. Driving through Ozala, She admired the sunset that cast a golden glow over the landscape. But then she saw him. A small figure, lying helplessly by the roadside, half buried in dust. Sophia's heart skipped. She pulled her car to an abrupt stop and rushed out. "Oh God," she whispered, kneeling beside him. The boy was skin and bone, his breathing shallow. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Hey, it's okay," she said softly, her Irish accent thick but her voice gentle. She dashed back to her car, grabbed a bottle of water, and returned. Carefully, she lifted his head and tilted the bottle to his lips. Slowly, that's it." Obi's eyes flickered open, catching a glimpse of her face. For the first time in years, he saw kindness. He swallowed greedily, tears mixing with dust on his cheeks. Sophia stroked his hair. "You're safe now. I'm not leaving you here." She lifted him gently into her car, placed him on the back seat, and with determination in her eyes, sped towards the nearest hospital. For Obi, the world began to blur again, but this time, it was not from hunger. It was from hope, fragile, faint, but real. And thus began the story of a broken boy and the stranger who would change his life forever. The hospital smelled of disinfectant and boiled herbs. The faint hum of ceiling fans filled the ward, doing little to chase away the heavy heat of the Nigerian evening. Nurses in crisp white uniforms moved briskly between beds, checking charts and adjusting drips. In the corner of the children's ward, on a narrow iron-framed bed, lay Obi. His thin body was covered with a clean sheet, and 4 lines snaked into his small arm, feeding him the strength that food had long denied. His eyelids twitched as though fighting unseen battles in his dreams. Sophia Connolly sat at his bedside. Her blonde hair was tied back, her freckled face flushed from worry. She had been there for hours, refusing to leave. Every so often she would glance at him, her heart twisting at the thought of what this child had endured. When the doctor arrived, a tall man with tired eyes and kind manners, Sophia stood quickly. "Doctor, how is he?" she asked anxiously. The doctor sighed and glanced at the boy. "He's malnourished, severely dehydrated, but we've stabilized him. He will survive, though it is a miracle he lasted this long without food." Sophia closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank God." "You're his guardian?" the doctor asked. Sophia hesitated. "Not exactly. I found him on the roadside. He was dying." Her voice cracked. "No child should ever be left like that." The doctor nodded gravely. "Children like him, they are often accused of things they know nothing about. It happens in villages. Superstitions can be cruel." His words struck Sophia like a dart. She glanced at Obi again, lying helpless, and clenched her fists. What kind of world abandons a child to death? 2 days later, Obi stirred awake. His eyes fluttered open, adjusting to the dim light of the ward. The first thing he saw was Sophia, sitting at his bedside, holding a book but watching him more than reading. He blinked, confused. "Where am I?" His voice was faint, a whisper broken by weakness. Sophia leaned closer, relief washing over her face. "You're in the hospital, love. You're safe now. My name is Sophia." Obi swallowed hard. His throat was dry, but his lips formed the words, "What? Did you help me?" Sophia's eyes softened. "Because you needed someone, and because no child deserves to be alone in pain." Silence hung between them for a while. Obi looked away, staring at the white ceiling. Slowly, tears rolled down his cheeks. "My auntie," he began, his voice trembling. "She said I am a witch. She told everyone in the village. They chased me away. Nobody wanted me. Not even my uncle." Sophia's heart shattered at his words. She reached for his hand, small and frail, and held it gently. "Oh, Obi, listen to me. Her voice was firm now, almost fierce. You are not a witch. You are just a child. You are precious. Do you hear me? Precious. Obi looked at her, unsure whether to believe. He had never heard such words before. Not from his auntie. Not from the villagers. But there was something in Sophia's eyes, a sincerity he could not deny. He sniffled and whispered, "Why me? Why did they hate me?" Sophia shook her head, tears brimming. Because sometimes, people are afraid of what they don't understand. They blame the innocent for their own misfortunes. But their hatred does not define who you are. Obi stared at her, his small chest rising and falling. For the first time in years, a faint smile tugged at the corner of his lips. The days passed. Sophia visited daily, bringing fruits, toys, and books. She told him stories of her homeland, Ireland, the green fields, the tall cliffs, the snow that fell in winter. Obi listened with wide eyes, almost unable to imagine such a world. Snow, he repeated one evening, laughing weakly. White like Gari? Sophia chuckled. Yes, only colder. Much colder. Someday, Obi, I'll show you. Her words planted a seed of hope in him, a vision of a life beyond pain and rejection. But Sophia knew she had a choice to make. Her vacation was ending in a few weeks. She could not simply leave him behind, not after what she had seen, not after what he had endured. One evening, as the sun dipped beyond the hospital windows, she sat at his bedside and spoke softly. Obi, what would you say if I told you I want to take care of you? Properly. Not just now, but always. Obi blinked at her, confused. Always? Yes, Sophia said, her voice trembling. I want to be your family. I want you to go to school, to eat well, to have clothes, friends, a future. And if you'd let me, I would like to be your mother. For a moment, Obi just stared at her, his thin fingers clutching the bedsheet. His eyes widened as though he had heard an impossible dream. My mother, he whispered. Sophia nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. Yes, Obi, my son. And with that, Obi broke into tears, not the tears of hunger or pain he had shed for years, but tears of hope, of longing finally answered. He reached for her hand and held it tightly. Thank you, Mama, he whispered, the word foreign on his tongue, yet sweet. Sophia pulled him into her arms, holding him as though she would never let go. That night, as the village outside bustled with its usual rhythm, a new story was quietly being written in that little hospital room. A story of rejection turned to redemption, of despair turning into love. Obi had found a stranger. But in truth, he had found much more. He had found a family. The days rolled into weeks, and Obi's strength returned little by little. His cheeks filled out, his eyes no longer hollow but bright with the first flicker of hope. The nurses marveled at the change. That Irish woman, they whispered among themselves, she treats him as if he is her own blood. Sophia Connolly had indeed become a constant presence. She wasn't just paying the hospital bills, she spent hours with Obi, reading to him, teaching him songs, and holding his hand through long nights when bad dreams haunted his sleep. One morning, after the doctor declared Obi fit to leave the hospital, Sophia made her next decision. She dressed him in fresh clothes she had bought from the city, a white shirt, brown shorts, and sandals that actually fit. Obi kept looking down at himself, his hands brushing the fabric. Do I really look fine? He asked shyly. Sophia knelt before him, smiling. You look more than fine. You look like the young man you were always meant to be. For Obi, those words were gold. Instead of heading straight back to her hotel, Sophia drove to a nearby private school. It was a modest but well-kept institution, with painted classrooms, a library, and children in clean uniforms laughing in the courtyard. The headmistress, a woman in her 40s with rimmed glasses, greeted them politely. Sophia explained Obi's situation in careful detail. Not everything, but enough. I would like to enroll him here, Sophia said firmly. He deserves the chance to learn. The headmistress hesitated, glancing at Obi, who shrank behind Sophia's arm. Madam, you know how villages talk. I have heard stories of this boy. People say... Sophia's voice cut sharp as a blade. Stories. But he is not what they say he is. He is a child. And if this school is truly a place of learning, then you must give him the chance. The headmistress cleared her throat, embarrassed by the firmness in Sophia's tone. Of course, Madam Connolly. We will give him a trial. Obi clutched Sophia's hand tightly, afraid but comforted. For the first time, he saw a door open for him, not slam shut. But word traveled fast in Ozalla. By the time Sophia returned Obi to her guest lodge that evening, tongues were wagging. At the village square, Obiageli was fuming. So she has taken him to school? She spat, her voice sharp like pepper. She wants to spoil the boy and give him wings. Doesn't she know he is cursed? Okafor, her husband, shifted uneasily. Obiageli, maybe we judge too quickly. See how the boy is looking healthier. Shut your mouth, she snapped. Have you forgotten the sickness in our house? The failures? You think it was coincidence? No, it was him. He should never have been allowed to return here. The villagers listened, some nodding, some unsure. A few began to murmur doubts. Yet, the woman from abroad cares for him as if he were her own, one old man remarked thoughtfully. If he were truly a witch, would he be alive now? Would she not have suffered misfortune already? But Obiageli would not be swayed. That woman does not understand our ways. She will regret it. Meanwhile, Obi sat with Sophia on the balcony of the lodge. The evening air was cool, carrying the scent of roasted maize from nearby stalls. Obi held a pencil Sophia had bought him, scribbling shaky letters on a notepad. What are you writing, love? Sophia asked, sipping her tea. Obi grinned shyly. My name. Obi. He showed her proudly. The letters were crooked, but to Sophia, it was the most beautiful handwriting she had ever seen. That's wonderful, she said, clapping lightly. One day, you'll write whole stories about your life, and the world will read them. Obi's eyes widened. Stories? About me? Yes, Sophia replied warmly. Because your life is important. Never forget that. Obi looked at her for a long moment, then whispered, I wish my mama and papa were here to see this. Sophia's chest tightened. She placed her arm around him and said softly, They would be proud, Obi. Very proud. But not everyone was happy about Obi's new beginning. The very next morning, Sophia awoke to find a group of villagers gathered outside the lodge gates. Obiageli was at the front, her voice raised, her eyes burning with rage. You have no right to keep that boy, she shouted when Sophia stepped out. He belongs to this family. You do not know what evil you are carrying into your hands. Sophia stood tall, her blue eyes fixed on Obiageli. Evil? She repeated, her voice steady. This child is not evil. He is your nephew. He is your responsibility. Yet you left him to die. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Obiageli's face twisted. You don't understand our land, Oyinbo woman. We know things you do not. Take him away if you like, but don't say I didn't warn you when the curses begin. Sophia stepped closer, her voice low but firm. I am not afraid of curses. I am afraid of cruelty. And I will not allow cruelty to decide this boy's life anymore. The villagers watched, torn between old beliefs and the undeniable truth before them. Obi was alive, healthier, smiling, because someone had shown him love. Sophia turned, took Obi's hand, and led him back inside. Her heart was pounding, But her decision was unshakable. Obi, looking up at her with wide, fearful eyes, whispered, "Will they take me away?" Sophia knelt, cupping his face in her hands. "No, Obi. No one will take you away. From today, you are my son. And no one, not your auntie, not the villagers, not anyone, will change that." Obi leaned into her embrace, his fear melting into quiet relief. For the first time in his life, he truly felt protected. And outside, though the voices of doubt still lingered, a new story was being written, one where love dared to fight superstition. At night, when the world was quiet and the crickets sang in the tall grass, Obi's battles were not over. Though his belly was full and his body clean, his mind was still trapped in shadows. In the small room Sophia rented for them, Obi often woke with a start, gasping, his small body covered in sweat. His thin fingers clutched the bedsheet as though clinging to life itself. Sometimes he screamed in his sleep, cries that echoed through the room until Sophia rushed to his side. "Obi, love, it's just a dream," she whispered one night, wrapping her arms around him. His body shook violently. "They were chasing me," Obi cried, his words tumbling out between sobs. "The villagers, they were shouting, they wanted to kill me. Mama and Papa were not there, nobody was there." Sophia rocked him gently, stroking his hair. "Shoo, I'm here now. They can't hurt you anymore. You're safe with me." It took weeks before the nightmares began to soften, but they never fully disappeared. Trauma, Sophia realized, was not erased in a day. It had to be healed, layer by layer, with patience and love. Obi searched her face, as though trying to measure the weight of her words. For the first time, he allowed himself to believe them. He leaned into her arms, whispering, "I miss them." "I know, love," Sophia whispered, kissing his forehead. "And I promise, I will honor them by making sure you never suffer like that again." School became another battlefield for Obi's healing. At first, he was shy and withdrawn. When the teacher asked questions, he lowered his head. When other children laughed or whispered, he thought they were mocking him. But Sophia stood by him. She encouraged him to take small steps. She praised his efforts, celebrated his progress. One afternoon, he ran to her, his eyes wide with excitement, holding up an exercise book. "Mama, look, I got 10 out of 10. Sophia laughed, her joy as bright as the sun. She knelt and hugged him tightly. "I knew you could do it, Obi. I am so proud of you." Obi's heart swelled. Nobody had ever told him those words before. For once, he felt more than just a survivor. He felt seen, valued. Yet, the scars of rejection still lingered. When he walked past villagers, some still muttered under their breath. "The witch boy is alive," they would say. Obi would shrink into himself, afraid the whispers were true. One day, when he returned home in tears, Sophia sat him down firmly. "Obi, people will always talk. But you must choose which voices you listen to. Their words are poison, but mine are truth. And the truth is this: you are good, you are strong, and you are mine." For the first time, Obi looked at her with trust that ran deeper than fear. Slowly, the chains of lies began to loosen around his heart. Months passed. Obi grew taller, his cheeks rounder, his laughter louder. He loved to read, to draw, and to tell Sophia about his dreams. "I want to be a doctor," he said one evening, "so I can help children like me. Children who are sick, children who have nobody." Sophia's eyes brimmed with tears. She hugged him tightly. "And you will be Obi. You will be." But deep down, she knew something. For Obi's dream to truly blossom, he needed more than temporary care. He needed permanence. He needed a home where the shadow of superstition could never touch him again. Sophia had made up her mind. She would adopt Obi, not just in words, but in law. She would take him with her to Ireland, to a place where he would never again be called cursed. The road ahead would not be simple. There would be paperwork, resistance, and endless questions. But Sophia was ready. She had already made her choice. And as Obi drifted to sleep that night, whispering, "Good night, Mama," she looked at him and vowed silently. The morning air was heavy with the scent of rain-soaked earth. Sophia sat at a wooden desk inside the district office, her papers neatly stacked before her. Across from her sat the social welfare officer, a middle-aged man in a faded blue shirt with sharp eyes and a careful tone. "So, Madam Connolly," he began, adjusting his glasses, "you are requesting legal custody of this child? You understand this is not a simple matter." Sophia nodded firmly. "Yes, I want to adopt him. He has no parents. His guardians abandoned him. I want to give him a life." The officer leaned back, sighing. "It is true, the boy's case is tragic. But adoption, especially international adoption, requires proper procedures. We must speak to his family first. If they refuse, it complicates everything." Sophia's jaw tightened. His so-called family left him to die. They called him a witch. They don't deserve to decide his fate. The officer raised his hand gently. "Madam, I understand. But the law is the law. His auntie and uncle must be consulted." Sophia left the office that day with determination burning in her chest. If Obi's future depended on a fight, then she was ready. The meeting with the family was held in the village square. The elders sat on wooden stools, their wrappers tied firmly around their waists. The air buzzed with curiosity as villagers gathered to witness the confrontation. Obi sat close to Sophia, his small hand clinging to hers. He trembled, afraid, but Sophia's grip was steady, reassuring. At the center, Obiageli stood tall, her voice sharp as ever. "This Oyinbo woman wants to steal our child," she declared. "She wants to take him far away to her land. Do we even know what she will do with him?" The crowd murmured. Some nodded in agreement. Others exchanged uneasy glances. Sophia stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "I am not here to steal. I am here because this boy was left to die. You called him cursed. You starved him. You abandoned him. And yet you claim him now when someone else wants to give him love." Obiageli's face twisted with anger. "He is my husband's blood. He belongs here. If he dies, let him die here. If he suffers, let him suffer here. He is not yours to take." The words cut through Obi like a knife. His eyes filled with tears, and he pressed his face into Sophia's side. Sophia's voice rose, trembling with passion. "He is a child, not a curse. He deserves life, not death. He deserves school, not hunger. He deserves love, not hatred. And if you refuse to give him those things, then you have already lost the right to call him family." The elders whispered among themselves. One, an old man with a long gray beard, cleared his throat. "Madam Connolly, you speak with fire. But understand, this boy is of our blood. Taking him abroad is no small matter. Are you prepared to raise him as your own son, even in a land far from here?" Sophia turned to Obi, brushing a tear from his cheek. "I already do. He calls me Mama. And I call him son." The elder looked at Obi, then at the crowd. "The boy is alive today because of her. That much is clear. Perhaps the gods have written his path differently from ours." A heavy silence fell. Obiageli hissed and turned away, but she knew the tide was shifting. The process was long. Papers had to be signed, documents verified, and officials convinced. Sophia spent weeks traveling between the district office, the court, and the embassy. At every turn, she met questions, doubts, and suspicion. But at every turn, she pressed forward. And through it all, Obi clung to her, watching with wide eyes as she fought battles he never thought anyone would fight for him. Each day, his trust in her deepened. Each day, his heart healed a little more. One night, as they sat together under the starlit sky, Obi whispered, "Mama?" "Yes, love?" Sophia replied, brushing his hair back. "Why do you fight so much for me? Why don't you just leave me like the others?" Sophia's eyes softened. She pulled him into her lap and kissed his forehead. "Because, Obi, when I saw you that day by the roadside, I knew I couldn't walk away. I knew your life mattered. I knew you were mine. And a mother never abandons her child." Tears filled Obi's eyes, but they were not tears of pain. They were tears of belonging. For the first time in his life, he knew the meaning of home. Not a place, not a bloodline, but a person who refused to let him go. The day of judgment came like the slow rise of dawn, anticipated yet heavy with uncertainty. The courthouse in the district town was small but filled to its corners. Wooden benches creaked under the weight of villagers who had traveled just to witness what they whispered as the Oyinbo woman's case. At the front sat the magistrate, his robe slightly frayed at the edges but his gaze sharp. He adjusted his files and called for silence. "Today, we decide the future of a child named Obi," he announced. A boy accused by his relatives of witchcraft, abandoned, and later rescued by Madame Sophia Connolly, who now seeks to adopt him. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some villagers muttered, others crossed themselves in silence. Obi sat beside Sophia, his legs too short to reach the floor. He swung them nervously, clutching her hand so tightly his knuckles turned white. She gave his small fingers a gentle squeeze. The magistrate called Obiagili first. She rose, her wrapper rustling. Her voice was sharp, her tone defensive. "This boy belongs to us. His blood is our blood. If the white woman takes him, we will never see him again. What proof do we have she will care for him well? For all we know, she may use him for rituals in her country." The villagers stirred at her words, some nodding in agreement. Then Sophia was asked to speak. She rose slowly, her tall frame commanding attention. Her Irish accent cut through the silence, her words trembling with emotion but steady with conviction. "I came to this land for vacation," she began, "but what I found was a child lying half dead on the street. He had not eaten for days. His body was weak, his spirit broken. And what? Because the very people who should have protected him chose to abandon him." Her voice grew stronger. "Obi is not a curse. He is a boy, intelligent, kind, full of potential. He deserves a chance to live, to learn, to grow. If his family will not give him that chance, then I will. I will be his mother. I will give him a home. I will fight for him until my last breath." The courtroom was silent. Even the wind outside seemed to pause. The magistrate leaned forward, eyes resting on Obi. "Young boy," he said gently, "tell the court, what do you want?" A hush fell. Obi's lips trembled. He looked first at his auntie, who glared at him with burning eyes. Then he turned to Sophia, who gave him an encouraging nod. Taking a shaky breath, Obi whispered, "I want to go with Mama Sophia. She saved me. She loves me. I don't want to die. I want to live." Tears filled Sophia's eyes. She covered her mouth with her hand, struggling to contain her emotions. The magistrate nodded solemnly. "The voice of the child has spoken, and the court cannot ignore the facts. His family abandoned him. His guardian accused him falsely. This woman gave him life and love. Therefore, I rule in favor of Madame Sophia Connolly. Custody and full adoption rights are hereby granted." The gavel struck the desk with a loud crack. For a moment, the world was still. Then Obi burst into tears, not of pain, but of overwhelming relief. Sophia gathered him into her arms, whispering, "You're mine now, love. Forever. Obiageli hissed loudly and stormed out, muttering curses under her breath. Some villagers followed, but others remained, watching with softened eyes, perhaps realizing for the first time that the boy they had condemned was, after all, just a child. The farewell was bittersweet. On the morning of their departure, Sophia and Obi returned briefly to the village. Some children ran after the car, waving. An old woman came forward with a basket of kola nuts and pressed it into Sophia's hands. "Take care of him," she whispered. Sophia nodded, touched by the small gesture. Obi stood silently, gazing at the huts, the dusty paths, the trees he had once played under with his late parents. His chest tightened. This had been his prison, his pain, but also his birthplace, the soil that held the memory of his mother and father. Sophia knelt beside him. "Are you ready, love?" Obi hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Yes, Mama. But, can we come back one day? To see where they rest?" Sophia's eyes softened. She hugged him close. "Of course, Obi. We will come back. Not as outcasts, but as family." With that, they stepped into the waiting car. The engine roared to life. As the vehicle rolled away, Obi pressed his face against the window, watching the village grow smaller and smaller until it disappeared behind the trees. For the first time in his life, Obi was not walking away empty-handed. He was walking toward a new life, holding the hand of someone who refused to let him go. And somewhere deep within, the boy who had once been called cursed whispered to himself, "I am not a witch. I am a son." Arriving in Ireland, the cold hit Obi first. As the glass doors of Dublin airport slid open with a mechanical sigh, a wave of crisp, damp air rushed toward him, biting against his skin. He clutched Sophia's hand tighter, his small body pressed against her side. He had never felt cold like this before, not the soft chill of Harmattan mornings in Nigeria, but a deep, bone-shaking cold that seemed to seep through his thin jacket and straight into his chest. His teeth chattered, though he tried to hide it. Sophia looked down at him and gave his hand a reassuring squeeze. "It's all right, love. Just a little different from home, that's all." She adjusted the scarf she had wrapped around his neck. "You'll get used to it." Obi said nothing. His eyes darted around the airport, high ceilings with rows of fluorescent lights, gleaming tiled floors that reflected the movement of rushing travelers, and signs with strange words he couldn't read. People moved in every direction, some dragging shiny wheeled bags, others speaking quickly in accents he had never heard before. Their clothes looked heavy and warm, their faces pale and unfamiliar. He shrank closer to Sophia, clutching her arm as though she were the only thing tethering him to this strange new world. Sophia noticed his unease. She crouched slightly so her eyes met his. "Remember what I told you, Obi? This is Dublin. My home. And now it's our home." He nodded faintly, though his gaze remained fixed on the floor. As they moved through immigration, Sophia handed over a stack of documents, passports, custody papers, letters from the court in Nigeria. The officer, a tall man with sandy hair, leafed through the pages with a professional frown. He looked at Obi, then back at Sophia. "This your boy?" he asked casually. "Yes," Sophia said firmly, her voice steady. "My son." The words hung in the air, strong and deliberate. Obi's head lifted slightly at the sound of them. The officer gave a curt nod, stamped the papers, and slid them back across the counter. "Welcome home, then." Sophia smiled with quiet relief. She took Obi's hand again, leading him toward the baggage claim. Outside, the sky was an endless stretch of gray. The clouds hung low, heavy with drizzle. Cars whooshed past on the wet roads, spraying mist into the air. Obi pressed his face against the car window as their taxi pulled away from the airport. His wide eyes tried to take in everything at once. Rows of neat houses with chimneys, roads marked with white paint, tall lampposts bending over the streets like watchful giants. But the more he looked, the more his chest tightened. Everything was so different, so loud, so strange. The fields were green instead of brown. The air smelled of rain and smoke instead of dust and firewood. Even the people, they looked nothing like the villagers he had grown up with. Their hair, their skin, their voices, all foreign. Obi shifted uncomfortably in his seat. For the first time since leaving Nigeria, a deep fear crept into his heart. What if he didn't belong here? What if Sophia realized he didn't fit into her world and decided she didn't want him anymore? Sophia, sensing his silence, reached over and rested her hand on his small shoulder. "You're very quiet, love. What are you thinking about?" Obi hesitated. He wanted to say the truth, that he was scared, that he felt like an outsider, that he missed the sounds of his village even though it had been a place of pain. But the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he shrugged and whispered, "Nothing, Mama." Sophia smiled gently, though she could see the storm behind his eyes. She pulled him closer, letting him rest his head on her arm. "Don't worry," she murmured. "We'll figure everything out together. You're safe with me." The taxi pulled into a quiet street lined with brick houses, their walls a patchwork of red and brown. Some had neat little gardens with trimmed hedges, others small driveways with parked cars. The driver stopped in front of a modest two-story house with a white door and a brass knocker. Sophia paid the fare and opened the door. "Here we are, Obi. Home." Obi stepped out cautiously, his shoes crunching on the wet gravel. He looked up at the house. It seemed impossibly tall compared to the mud huts of his village. The windows glistened with rain, and smoke curled lazily from a chimney. He clutched Sophia's hand tighter. Inside, warmth enveloped him immediately. The smell of wood smoke mingled with something sweet, freshly baked bread perhaps. The hallway was narrow but cozy, with framed photographs on the walls. Sophia with her parents, Sophia standing by the cliffs of Maher, Sophia at a family gathering with cousins and siblings. Obi paused, staring at the faces in the photographs. They all looked happy, smiling. And in that moment, a sharp pang of loneliness cut through him. Where were his photographs? Where were the smiling faces of his parents, his family? His home in Nigeria had no pictures, no framed memories. Just shadows of people who no longer lived. Sophia noticed him staring. She crouched beside him again. "Soon," she said softly, "we'll have our own photographs up there. You and me. New memories. New beginnings." Obi nodded slowly, though his throat felt tight. That night, Sophia showed him his new bedroom. The walls were painted a soft blue, with a small wooden bed covered in a checkered quilt. A teddy bear sat propped up against the pillow, its stitched smile waiting. On the desk, a lamp glowed warmly. Obi stood in the doorway, frozen. He had never had a room of his own before. Never a bed that was just for him. Never a toy that was his alone. Sophia placed a gentle hand on his back. "It's all yours, Obi. Your space. Your home." He stepped forward slowly, touching the quilt, then the teddy bear, then the desk, as though testing whether it was real. When he turned back to Sophia, his eyes shimmered with something unspoken, a mix of awe, disbelief, and fragile hope. She smiled and knelt to his level. "You don't have to be afraid anymore, love. This is the beginning of something new." For the first time since stepping foot in Ireland, Obi allowed himself a small smile. It was uncertain, hesitant, but it was real. That night, as he lay in the bed under the quilt, he whispered softly into the darkness, "Mama." And from down the hall, Sophia's voice drifted back, "Yes, love? Thank you." Her heart swelled. She closed her eyes, whispering a prayer into the quiet, "Let him know he is loved. Let him always know he belongs." Outside, The rain fell gently against the windows, as if blessing the start of their new life together. The first mornings in Ireland were the strangest of Obi's life. He woke to silence. No crowing roosters. No goats bleating in the yard. No distant calls of women drawing water or children playing in the dust. Instead, he heard only the faint hum of a radiator and the occasional patter of rain against the window. When he sat up in bed, wrapped in the heavy quilt, the cold air brushed against his cheeks. He pulled the blanket tighter, uncertain if he should leave the warmth. His small hands ran over the smooth fabric of the sheets, so different from the rough mats he had once slept on. It felt unreal, as though the room belonged to someone else and he was only visiting. From downstairs, the smell of toasted bread drifted upward. His stomach rumbled. Slowly, he slid out of bed, his bare feet sinking into the soft carpet. The sensation startled him. It felt like walking on grass, but warmer, softer. He tiptoed to the doorway, clutching the teddy bear Sophia had given him, and crept down the stairs. In the kitchen, Sophia stood at the stove, her hair tied back loosely, humming a tune as she buttered toast. She turned when she heard the creak of the stairs. "Good morning, love," she said warmly. "Did you sleep well?" Obi nodded shyly, eyes darting around the kitchen. The room was full of strange objects. A silver kettle steaming on the counter, a shiny toaster popping out bread, cupboards stacked with jars and boxes. He didn't recognize most of them, and the unfamiliarity made him uneasy. Sophia noticed his hesitation. "Come, sit." She pulled out a chair at the wooden table. "Breakfast is ready." He climbed onto the chair slowly, the teddy bear still in his lap. Sophia placed a plate in front of him, toast, butter, and a small glass of milk. Obi stared at it. Bread, but not the soft round loaves he knew. This one was sliced, square, and pale. And the milk, cold, straight from the fridge. He sniffed it cautiously, uncertain. Sophia smiled. "Go on, try it." He took a tentative bite, then another. Slowly, the fear faded. The toast was warm, crunchy, and the butter melted on his tongue. He drank the milk in small sips, still unused to the chill, but eventually he finished it all. Sophia clapped her hands softly. "Well done, Obi. Your first Irish breakfast." For the first time that morning, a small smile tugged at his lips. The days passed in a blur of discovery. Sophia took him to the park, where wide fields of green stretched endlessly and ducks floated in neat lines across the pond. She took him into the city, where buses rumbled and shops overflowed with goods. She even let him pick out new clothes, warm sweaters, sturdy shoes, a bright red jacket that made him look in the mirror twice. But every night when they returned home, Obi seemed to shrink again. He would sit quietly by the fire, wrapped in a blanket, his eyes distant. Sophia would sit beside him, sometimes speaking softly, sometimes simply staying silent, letting him know she was there. One evening, as the fire crackled, Sophia brought out a photo album. She opened it on her lap, flipping through pictures of her family, her parents on their wedding day, her brother at Christmas, her nieces and nephews laughing in the snow. "These are my people," she said, pointing. "And now they're your people too." Obi looked at the smiling faces. They seemed kind, but they were strangers. He pressed the teddy bear closer to his chest. Sophia noticed. She closed the album gently and placed a hand on his shoulder. "We'll make our own photos soon. You and me. New memories." For a long moment, Obi said nothing. Then, in a small voice, he asked, "Mama, will they like me?" Sophia's heart twisted. She cupped his cheek gently. "They'll love you, Obi, because you're my son. And anyone who loves me will love you too." Tears welled in his eyes, but he blinked them back. He leaned against her shoulder, whispering, "I hope so." The hardest part came at night. Though his belly was full and his bed warm, Obi often woke in terror. His small body jerked upright, sweat soaking his shirt. His cries filled the quiet house. "No. Please, don't beat me. Don't call me witch." Sophia rushed to his room, gathering him into her arms. She rocked him gently, whispering, "Shoo, love. You're safe now. No one will hurt you again. Not while I'm here." Sometimes it took an hour before he calmed, his tears soaking her nightgown. But Sophia never wavered. She stayed, holding him until sleep returned. Trauma, she knew, did not vanish quickly. It lingered like shadows. But little by little, she could see the light returning to him, slowly, cautiously, like dawn breaking over a long, dark night. One rainy afternoon, Sophia found him sitting by the window, tracing lines on the fogged glass with his finger. "What are you drawing?" she asked gently. He hesitated, then answered quietly, "My papa." Sophia sat beside him. "Tell me about him." Obi's voice was soft but steady. "He was strong. He carried me on his shoulders. He laughed loud. Mama sang when she cooked. She smelled like soap." His throat tightened. "But they're gone, and Auntie said they died because of me." Sophia turned sharply. "No, Obi. That's not true." She took his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her gaze. "Your parents loved you. Their deaths were not your fault. You are not cursed. You are loved." His eyes searched hers as though testing her words. For the first time, a crack appeared in the wall of lies he had carried. Slowly he whispered, "I miss them." Sophia kissed his forehead, tears in her eyes. "And we will honor them by making sure you live the life they would have wanted for you." Weeks turned into months. Obi grew more comfortable in the house, his laughter returning in small bursts. He learned new routines, brushing his teeth, tidying his room, helping Sophia stir soup in the kitchen. Each small step was a victory, a stitch in the torn fabric of his childhood. But even as he settled, shadows lingered. When they walked through town, he sometimes caught people staring at him, at his dark skin, his small hand in Sophia's pale one. The whispers of different haunted him, even if no one spoke them aloud. One evening, after a boy in the park had mocked his accent, Obi returned home in tears. Sophia sat him down firmly. "Obi, listen to me. People will always talk. But you must choose which voices to believe. Theirs are full of poison. Mine are full of truth. And the truth is this: you are good, you are strong, and you are mine." For the first time, Obi looked at her and believed it. That winter, on Christmas morning, Sophia handed him a small wrapped box. Obi tore the paper carefully, revealing a framed photograph. It was of the two of them, taken in the park weeks earlier. He was smiling, a real wide smile, and Sophia had her arm around him. Beneath the photo, in Sophia's neat handwriting, were the words, "Our first Christmas together." Obi held the frame close, his chest swelling with something new, something warm. For the first time in his life, he felt not just rescued, but rooted. Home was not a place. Home was Sophia. By the time Obi turned 13, the little boy who had once clung to Sophia's arm had grown into a tall, lean teenager. His cheeks had lost their softness, his voice had begun to deepen, and his eyes carried both intelligence and restlessness. But with growth came questions. And with questions came storms. It began in small ways. At school, when classmates asked, "Where are you from?" Obi would hesitate. If he answered, "Nigeria," they would raise eyebrows, sometimes laugh, sometimes whisper jokes about witchcraft or poverty. If he answered, "Ireland," they would shake their heads and say, "But you don't look Irish." No matter what he said, he never felt like he fit. At home, he was safe. Sophia's love was constant, her voice always calm, her arms always ready to pull him in. But beyond those walls, Obi wrestled with a gnawing truth. He belonged everywhere and nowhere. One evening, the storm broke. The kitchen smelled of stew, the windows steamed from the warmth of cooking. Sophia stirred at the stove, humming softly. Obi came in, his school bag hanging heavy on one shoulder. He dropped it onto the floor with a loud thud. Sophia turned, surprised. "Long day?" Obi didn't answer. He yanked open the fridge, grabbed a bottle of water, and slammed the door shut. "Obi," Sophia said gently, "what's wrong?" His fists clenched. "Why did you bring me here?" Sophia froze, spoon hovering over the pot. "What do you mean, love?" He spun around, eyes blazing. "I don't belong here. Everyone looks at me like I'm different. They laugh at my accent, they ask stupid questions. I'm not Irish, I'm not Nigerian, I'm nothing." Sophia set the spoon down slowly, her face calm though her heart thudded. "Obi, sit down. Let's talk." "No." His voice cracked, a mixture of anger and pain. "You don't get it. You're white, you belong here. You don't know what it's like to always be the outsider." Sophia took a breath, steadying herself. She walked closer, but Obi stepped back, his chest heaving. "I didn't ask for this," he said, his voice trembling now. "I didn't ask to be saved. Maybe I should have stayed in Nigeria. Maybe I should have just—" He stopped, the unfinished words hanging heavy in the air. Sophia's heart ached. She reached out slowly, but her hand hovered just short of his arm. "Obi, don't say that. Don't you ever think your life was a mistake?" Tears welled in his eyes, though he blinked them back furiously. "Then tell me who I am. Tell me where I belong." The kitchen was silent except for the bubbling stew. Sophia's throat tightened. She wanted to give him an answer, a neat truth that would erase his pain. But she couldn't. Instead, she said softly, "You belong with me. You are my son. That's the truest thing I know." Obi shook his head, turning away. "That's not enough." He stormed upstairs, leaving Sophia standing in the quiet kitchen, the stew forgotten. That night, she found him sitting on his bed, staring at the ceiling. His school bag lay open on the floor, books scattered like fallen leaves. She sat gently at the edge of the bed. For a long time, she said nothing. Then, in a soft voice, "You're right, Obi. I don't know what it's like to walk in your skin. I'll never know. But I do know this: you are not nothing. You are not a mistake. You are my son. And you are becoming a man who will change things, even if you can't see it yet." Obi didn't respond, but his shoulders trembled. Sophia touched his hand lightly. "One day, you'll understand why you were spared, why you were given a second chance. Until then, all I can do is walk beside you." He turned his face away, tears slipping silently down his cheeks. The following weeks were rocky. Obi pulled back, spending more time in his room, headphones in his ears, sketching in his notebook or staring at the ceiling. Sophia gave him space, but she never withdrew her presence. She left food at his door, knocked gently each morning, reminded him quietly, "I'm here if you need me." And slowly the storm began to ease. One afternoon, Obi came home from school, his shoulders heavy but his eyes less guarded. He sat at the kitchen table while Sophia prepared tea. Without looking at her, he muttered, "Do you think my real parents would have wanted me to be here?" Sophia paused, the teacup in her hand. She set it down carefully and sat across from him. "Obi, your parents wanted one thing, for you to live. To grow. To thrive. They couldn't be here to see it, but I can. And I know this, they would be proud of you." For the first time in weeks, Obi lifted his eyes to hers. There was still doubt, still pain, but also a flicker of hope. Sophia reached across the table, taking his hand in hers. "You're not lost, Obi. You're just finding your way. And you don't have to do it alone." This time, he didn't pull away. In the quiet of his room that night, Obi opened his notebook. On one page, he wrote a single sentence in shaky letters. "I'm not nothing." Then, underneath, after a pause, "I am becoming." He closed the book, lay back, and for the first time in weeks, sleep came without tears. The autumn rain tapped gently against the window of Obi's bedroom. The sky outside was dark, the kind of gray that stretched endlessly over Dublin, broken only by the soft glow of streetlights. Inside, the room was dim except for the warm circle of light spilling from a small desk lamp. Obi sat hunched over his desk, elbows pressed against its wooden surface. His hair, now longer and untamed, cast faint shadows across his forehead. A worn paperback lay open before him, Long Walk to Freedom by Nelson Mandela. He had borrowed it from the school library earlier that week. At first, it was just another assignment, something his history teacher recommended. But as he turned the pages, the words stopped feeling like history. They began to feel like prophecy. For hours, Obi read. His lips moved silently as though he were tasting the words. He paused often, staring at certain lines, rereading them until they etched themselves into his memory. I never lost hope that this great transformation would occur. Not only because of the great heroes I revere, but because of the courage of the ordinary men and women of my country. The words struck him deeply. He thought of his own country, the dusty streets of the village, the accusing stares, the murmurs of witchcraft, the small boy abandoned under a tree. That boy was me, he thought. And yet here he was, alive, in a warm room in Dublin, with food downstairs and a mother who never stopped fighting for him. The thought stirred something fierce in his chest. A knock came at the door. "Obi!" Sophia's voice floated in, soft and careful. "Tea's ready, love." "Okay, Mama," he replied, eyes still fixed on the page. She lingered at the doorway, watching him from the shadows. She noticed the way his brow furrowed in concentration, the way his lips whispered Mandela's words. She smiled faintly, recognizing a fire she had not seen in him for a long time. She did not disturb him further, closing the door quietly behind her. Obi read late into the night. When his eyelids grew heavy, he placed the book on his chest and leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. His mind swirled with images: Mandela in prison, refusing to break, crowds in South Africa demanding freedom, a man walking out of the shadows of injustice into the light of history. And then, himself. He imagined standing before crowds, speaking, not with anger but with purpose. He imagined returning to Nigeria, not as the cursed boy who had once been rejected, but as a man who could bring change. He imagined building something lasting, something that could rewrite the story of children like him. For the first time in a long while, the question, "Who am I?" did not feel like a burden. It felt like an invitation. The next morning, Sophia found him asleep at his desk, the book still open under his hand. She placed a blanket over his shoulders and looked at the title. Her lips curled into a soft smile. "Maybe he's starting to see it," she whispered to herself. Over the following weeks, Obi carried the book everywhere. On the bus, in the cafeteria, even during breaks between classes, he would sit with it open, underlining passages with a pencil. His classmates noticed the change. He no longer avoided eye contact or sank into the background. There was a new steadiness in his eyes, a quiet strength. One afternoon, a teacher stopped him in the hallway. "Obi, I've been watching you. You've got something, a presence. Ever thought about joining the debate club?" Obi hesitated, then nodded. "Maybe I should." That night, he told Sophia. She clapped her hands, eyes twinkling. "Yes, Obi, that's wonderful. You've always had a voice. Maybe now it's time others heard it." Obi looked down at his hands, a small smile tugging at his lips. For the first time, he didn't feel afraid of being seen. And so, The boy who once trembled under the weight of whispers began to step into his own light. Alone in his room, with Mandela's words still echoing in his mind, Obi wrote a promise in his notebook, right beneath the words he had scribbled weeks earlier. "I am not nothing. I am becoming." Now he added, "I will fight for those who have no voice." That night, as the rain pattered outside and the lamp glowed softly on his desk, the fire of inspiration burned in him for the first time, not as a flicker, but as a steady flame. The assembly hall buzzed with restless chatter. Rows of students in navy blazers and neatly pressed trousers filled the wooden benches, some fiddling with their ties, others whispering and laughing as they waited for the morning program to begin. The high ceilings echoed every sound, the faint hum of fluorescent lights mixing with the scrape of shoes on the polished floor. At the front of the hall stood a simple podium, slightly scuffed from years of use. Behind it hung the school crest and the Irish flag, its green, white, and orange catching the dim morning light that streamed through tall windows. Obi sat in the second row, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. His heart pounded so loudly he wondered if those around him could hear it. He had been asked to speak after winning the regional debate competition, a victory that had surprised even himself. The principal had said, "It's time the whole school heard your voice, Obi." Now, as the microphone crackled to life, Obi wished he could disappear into the floor. "Next, we have a very special student," the principal announced warmly. "Sophia Connolly has represented our school with distinction. Today, he will share a few words with us." A ripple of polite applause followed. Obi stood slowly, his knees trembling. His blazer felt too tight, his tie too suffocating. He glanced at the sea of faces, hundreds of eyes watching, waiting. For a moment, panic clawed at his chest. He remembered the village square years ago, those same stares, those same whispers. Back then, the looks meant condemnation, rejection. What if they're judging me now too? Then, like a lifeline, Mandela's words returned. Courage is not the absence of fear, it's inspiring others to move beyond it. Obi placed both hands on the podium. He took a shaky breath, the microphone catching the small tremor. Then slowly his voice found strength. "When I first came to Ireland," he began, "I didn't know who I was. I didn't know where I belonged. People asked me, 'Are you Irish? Are you Nigerian?' And most days I didn't have an answer." The hall grew still. Even the whispers quieted. "I used to think being different was a curse, that it meant I would never fit anywhere. But I've learned something." His voice steadied further, rising with conviction. Being different is not a curse. It's a gift. It gives you two perspectives, two worlds, and a chance to build a bridge between them. Students leaned forward, listening. Teachers exchanged glances, impressed. Obi continued, his hands no longer trembling. "I was abandoned once. I was told I had no future. But someone believed in me when no one else did. And because of that, I stand here today. Not as a mistake. Not as a ghost. But as someone with a purpose." His eyes scanned the crowd, landing on a boy at the back who often sat alone, shoulders slouched. Then on a girl who had once been teased for her accent. And finally on a group of younger students who looked at him with wide, curious eyes. "To anyone here who feels invisible," Obi said, his voice strong now, echoing through the hall, "you are not alone. Your story matters. Your voice matters. And one day what makes you different might just be what makes you great." For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then the hall erupted in applause. Students clapped, some even rose to their feet. The boy at the back lifted his head. The girl who had been teased wiped her eyes discreetly. Obi stepped away from the podium, his chest heaving, not with fear this time, but with exhilaration. For the first time, his voice had not only been heard, it had been received. Afterwards, as the crowd dispersed, The principal placed a hand on Obi's shoulder. Son, you don't just speak, you move people. Remember that. Sophia was waiting at the gate when school ended. Obi climbed into the car, his blazer slightly rumpled, his tie loosened. She looked at him closely. Well? She asked, a knowing smile tugging at her lips. Obi shrugged, but a small grin escaped. It went good. She laughed softly, squeezing his hand. Good doesn't cover it. I think today was the beginning of something bigger. Obi looked out the window as the car pulled away, watching the school shrink in the distance. For the first time, he felt not just like he belonged, but like he had something to give. That night, in his notebook he wrote, "My voice is my gift. I will use it to light the dark for others." And as he closed the book, he felt the fire inside him burn brighter than ever. The children's shelter in North Dublin was tucked between two old brick buildings, its exterior painted in cheerful colors that tried to disguise the wear and tear of time. A mural of bright balloons and smiling faces stretched across one wall, though some of the paint had chipped away from years of rain. Inside, the air carried the smell of crayons, disinfectant, and warm stew. It was here that Obi, now 17, found himself one Saturday morning, tugging nervously at the sleeves of his hoodie as Sophia signed them both in at the reception desk. "First day jitters?" she asked, her voice low. Obi shrugged, but his eyes scanned the busy room beyond. Children ran about, some laughing, some clinging nervously to stuffed animals. Volunteers moved between them, setting out board games, serving juice, kneeling to tie shoelaces. The noise was chaotic, but beneath it was an energy Obi recognized, survival mixed with longing. He exhaled slowly. "Yeah, just feels familiar." Sophia squeezed his shoulder. "That's why you're perfect for this." The coordinator, a brisk but kind woman named Mrs. McHugh, greeted them and explained the basics. Then she pointed Obi toward a corner where a few younger kids sat huddled around a pile of toy blocks. Obi hesitated for a moment, then crouched down to their level. The children eyed him cautiously. A little boy, maybe 6, clutched a toy car to his chest and asked, "Are you new?" Obi nodded. "Yeah. First day. You going to show me how this works?" He gestured toward the half-built tower of blocks. The boy's face lit up. "Okay." And just like that, the walls between them began to fall. Over the hours that followed, Obi found himself laughing more than he expected. He built towers that reached higher than the children's heads, only to let them knock them down with gleeful shrieks. He played hide-and-seek through the narrow hallways, crawled on the floor pretending to be a lion, and sat cross-legged as 2 girls braided his hair into lopsided plaits while giggling uncontrollably. For a moment, he forgot about school pressures, about the questions of identity that still lingered in his heart. In their laughter, he heard echoes of himself, the boy who had once been abandoned, who had once longed for someone to kneel beside him and say, "You're safe. You belong." At one point, Obi paused, watching as a group of children shared crayons, their small hands scribbling colorful shapes across paper. Something stirred in him, deep and certain. This is what I'm meant to do. Not just speak, but to act. To show them they matter. Later that afternoon, as the day wound down, a girl of about 8 tugged at his sleeve. Her hair was tied in uneven pigtails, and her eyes were wide and solemn. "Will you come back?" she asked softly. Obi felt a lump rise in his throat. He knelt so their eyes were level. "Of course I will. I promise." Her small arms wrapped around his neck in a fierce hug before she ran off to join the others. On the way home, the car was quiet at first. Obi leaned his head against the window, watching the gray Dublin streets blur past. Then he spoke. "Mama," he said quietly, I think this is what I want to do. Not just for today. For my life. Helping kids like that. Kids who feel lost, kids who've been left behind." Sophia's hands tightened on the steering wheel, her eyes glistening. She had seen many sparks of passion in Obi before, but this felt different. This felt like destiny taking root. She reached over and squeezed his hand. "Then that's what you'll do, Obi. And I'll be right there with you." That night, Obi opened his notebook again. The pages were filled now, scribbles, quotes, fragments of thought. He flipped to a fresh sheet and wrote, carefully and with certainty, "My voice gives hope. My hands give love. My life will give both." As he set down the pen, he felt it clearly. The fire inside him was no longer just his own. It belonged to every child who had ever felt invisible, every child waiting for someone to see them. And for the first time, Obi knew that he was not only becoming, he was beginning. The campus buzzed with life, students with backpacks hurrying across stone paths, bicycles clattering against racks, and the hum of conversations in a dozen different accents. Sophia Connolly, now 18, stood in the middle of it all, his acceptance letter still folded in his pocket. He had been admitted to study social work and child development at Trinity College, Dublin. For him, this was more than just education, it was destiny calling. Sophia walked beside him, her eyes glistening with pride. "Look at you, Obi. From the boy I found by the roadside to a university student. Your parents would be so proud." Obi smiled, though his heart pounded with both excitement and fear. "I hope I don't fail, Mama." Sophia squeezed his shoulder. "You've already passed the hardest test of life. The rest is just learning." University was a new world entirely. The lectures were intense, the reading lists endless, and the freedom intoxicating. But Obi carried something with him that many of his classmates did not, a purpose carved from pain. He joined student organizations, particularly those focused on humanitarian work. At meetings, he spoke about child abandonment in Nigeria and across Africa. His words carried weight, not just because of his eloquence, but because they came from lived experience. One evening, after giving a talk, a fellow student approached him. "Obi, have you ever thought about starting something? Like a project? Or even an organization?" The idea struck like a spark in dry grass. Obi couldn't sleep that night. He lay awake, sketching plans in his notebook. A shelter for children accused of witchcraft. Counseling and education for families. Partnerships with hospitals and schools. A safe place, filled with love. By morning, the dream had shape. He wrote across the top of the page, "The Sophia Connolly Foundation." At 19, Obi returned to Nigeria for the first time since leaving. Sophia went with him, her hair streaked with more silver now but her spirit unchanged. The village had changed little. The same dusty roads, the same mud houses, the same curious stares. But Obi had changed. When he stood in the square where he had once been condemned, the memories flooded back. His aunt's voice, the hunger, the fear. For a moment, his knees trembled. Sophia touched his hand. "You don't have to be afraid anymore." Obi lifted his chin. "I'm not. Not anymore." He addressed the villagers, some of whom still whispered when they saw him. "I was once called cursed here. I was left to die. But look at me now. I am alive, I am educated, and I am back to help. I don't come with anger. I come with hope." His words carried through the square like the toll of a bell. Some villagers bowed their heads in shame. Others looked at him with awe. Even the children gathered close, their eyes wide. That trip became the beginning of his foundation. With Sophia's help, and with support from donors he had met in Ireland, Obi rented a small building in the city nearby. It was painted bright yellow, its doors wide open. On the first day, 3 children arrived, skinny, frightened, much like Obi had once been. They clung to each other, unsure if this was yet another place of rejection. Obi knelt before them, smiling gently. "Welcome home," he said. "Here you are safe. Here you are loved." The children's faces softened, their tears giving way to cautious smiles. Sophia, watching from the doorway, wiped her eyes. Her heart swelled with pride. The boy she had rescued was now rescuing others. At 20, Obi was invited to give a speech at an international conference on child welfare in Geneva. Standing before leaders and policymakers, he shared his story, not as a victim, but as proof of what love and resilience could build. He ended with words that made the hall rise in applause. "I was once abandoned because of lies. Today, I stand here not as a curse, but as a testimony. Every child, no matter where they are born, deserves love, not fear. Safety, not abuse. A chance to live, not a sentence to die. That is what we must fight for." Back in Dublin, Sophia watched her adopted son's face on the television screen. Her chest tightened with emotion. From the frail boy she had lifted off the dusty roadside to the young man changing lives, Obi had become everything she had believed he could be. When he returned from the conference, she embraced him tightly. "You've done it, Obi. You've turned pain into purpose." Obi smiled softly. "I couldn't have done it without you, Mama. You saved me first. Now it's my turn to save others." And together, they sat in the quiet of their Dublin home, knowing that the story which began with hunger and rejection had blossomed into a mission of hope, a mission that was only just beginning. The Sophia Connolly Foundation had grown beyond what Obi once scribbled in his notebook as a teenager. What began as a small rented building was now a fully functioning children's village. Bright houses with painted walls, a school, a clinic, and a playground that rang with laughter instead of tears. Children once branded witches now ran freely, their voices a chorus of joy. Volunteers came from across Nigeria and abroad. Donations poured in from Ireland, the UK, and even the United States. At 25, Obi was no longer just a survivor. He was a leader, a symbol of resilience, and a voice for the voiceless. But there was one wound left unhealed. News reached him that Umueze, his father's brother's wife, was still alive in the village. Time had bent her back, but her tongue was still sharp. She remained feared, her influence still heavy in the lives of others. For years, Obi had avoided facing her. But now, something within him stirred, a need not for vengeance, but for closure. "Mama," he said one evening to Sophia, now older, her hair completely silver but her spirit fierce as ever, "I think it's time I face her." Sophia's eyes softened. "Are you ready, love?" "Yes," Obi replied. "This is not for revenge. It's for peace." When Obi returned to the village, people no longer whispered, "the witch boy." They now said, "the one who built homes for children." Children ran after his car, calling his name. Elders greeted him with respect. The same square where he had once been condemned was now the place where villagers gathered to welcome him. But Obi's eyes searched for her, the woman who had nearly stolen his childhood. Umueze sat on a low stool by the shade of a mango tree, her once commanding voice now raspy, her frame frail. Yet when she saw Obi approach, her eyes narrowed. "So," she spat, "the boy who should have died still walks this earth." Obi stopped a few feet away, his heart steady. For a moment, he saw himself again as the hungry child, trembling under her accusations. But then he saw the children he had rescued, the homes he had built, the hope he had become. He stood taller. "Auntie," he said softly, "I came to see you, not as your victim, but as your witness." She scoffed. "Witness to what?" "To the truth," Obi replied firmly. "That I was never a witch. That your lies could not kill me. You tried to curse me, but I became a blessing. You abandoned me, but I built a home for the abandoned. You left me to die, but I chose to live." For the first time, Umueze faltered. Her lips trembled, though pride held her tongue. The villagers around them murmured. Some shook their heads in shame, realizing how they had once joined her in condemning a child. Obi stepped closer, his voice calm but unyielding. "I do not hate you, Auntie. Hate would make me like you. Instead, I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to carry your poison in my heart." His words hung heavy in the air. Obiageli looked away, her eyes glistening, though no apology left her lips. Age had taken her strength, but not her pride. Obi turned to the villagers. "Let no child here ever suffer what I suffered. If you believe a child is cursed, bring them to me. I will show you they are not curses. They are gifts." The crowd erupted in applause, some weeping openly. The chains of superstition cracked, if not fully broken. That evening, Obi stood at the edge of the village, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and gold. Sophia stood beside him, leaning lightly on her cane. "You did it, love," she whispered. "You faced your past." Obi nodded, his chest rising with a deep breath. "And I've made peace with it. She no longer has power over me." He turned his gaze toward the horizon. "Now it's time to build more. Not just here, but everywhere children are abandoned." Sophia smiled, tears brimming her eyes. "And I will be here, cheering you on always." Obi slipped his arm around her shoulders. "I wouldn't be here without you, Mama. You gave me a life. Now I'll spend it giving life to others." The boy once left to die had not only survived, he had transformed his pain into a beacon of hope. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, Obi knew this was not the end of his story. It was only the beginning of a legacy. Years passed. The Obi Children's Village became more than a shelter. It was a home, a school, and a sanctuary for children who had once been abandoned, accused, or forgotten. Two-story classrooms painted in bright colors stood side by side with dormitories where children slept safely at night. A playground echoed daily with laughter, and gardens flourished under the care of small, eager hands. Teachers, counselors. Obi, now a man, stood one evening at the gates as the golden hour bathed the village in amber light. Around him, the air was alive with the sound of children playing football, reciting lessons, and chasing each other with unrestrained joy. Sophia stood at his side, older now, her hair streaked with silver. But her eyes were as steady as ever, her spirit as fierce. "You've done it," she said softly, watching the children run. Obi shook his head gently. "We did it. I wouldn't be here without you." She reached for his hand, squeezing it. "And they wouldn't be here without you." For a moment, they simply stood together, watching the future unfold before them. That night, Obi sat in his office within the village, writing in the same notebook he had carried since he was a teenager. The pages were worn, the ink faded in places, but it was his anchor. He flipped back to the first words he had written years ago. "I am not nothing. I am becoming." Beneath it, in his mature handwriting, he added, "I have become. And I will keep becoming, until every child knows they are something." He closed the book, a quiet smile on his lips. The years rolled on, each one carrying new milestones, new challenges, and new victories. By his 40s, Obi Connolly had become a name spoken across continents. The boy once left to die in the dust of a Nigerian village was now a man who had built homes for thousands of children. The Obi Connolly Foundation had spread beyond Nigeria, establishing shelters in Ghana, Kenya, and even refugee camps in Sudan. In Dublin, the Irish government recognized him for his humanitarian work. Universities invited him to speak. Global leaders sought his counsel. But Obi never forgot where it began, with one woman who bent down on a dusty road and chose to save a forgotten child. Sophia Connolly was now old and frail, her steps slow, her body leaning heavily on a cane. Yet her spirit burned as fiercely as the day she had first lifted Obi into her arms. On a warm evening, she sat by the fireplace in their Dublin home, the same one where Obi had once whispered his childhood promise, "One day, I will build a house for children like me." Now, that promise had grown into a movement. Obi entered the room quietly, carrying a blanket. He draped it gently over her shoulders. "Mama," he said softly, "they've just finished building the new home in Lagos. 200 beds. A school beside it. And a clinic too." Sophia's tired eyes lit up. 200 children, safe. Obi nodded, kneeling beside her chair. "It's all because of you. You saved me first. You believed when no one else did." She reached out with trembling hands, cupping his face just as she had when he was 13. Her voice cracked, but her words were steady. "No, Obi. You saved yourself. I only gave you a chance. You turned it into a miracle." Tears welled in Obi's eyes. He pressed his forehead against her hands. "I love you, Mama." Sophia smiled faintly, her silver hair catching the glow of the fire. "And I love you, son. You were my greatest blessing." A few months later, Sophia passed away peacefully in her sleep. The news spread across Ireland and Nigeria alike. The Irish mother who saved the abandoned boy. At her funeral, leaders, villagers, and children whose lives had been touched by the foundation gathered. They wept, but they also celebrated. Because Sophia's love had not ended with her. It had multiplied through Obi and the countless children he saved. Obi stood at her graveside, his voice steady even as tears streamed down his face. "I am your legacy, Mama. And so are the thousands of children you've touched through me. Rest knowing your love will never die." Years later, a bronze statue was unveiled at the gates of the Sophia Connolly Children's Village in Lagos. It showed Sophia holding the hand of a small boy, a boy who looked just like Obi once did. Beneath it was inscribed, "She saved one child. He saved thousands. Love never ends." And so, the boy once called cursed became a man remembered as a savior, not only because he survived, but because he turned his scars into seeds of hope. The world knew him as Sophia Connolly, the child of two worlds. But in his heart he would always be one thing first, Sophia's son. Don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories. Like this video if it moved you. Share it with friends so the message spreads further. Your support helps us keep telling powerful stories that matter.